Today we're cooking one of our family's new favorite dishes, braised duck legs with flat green beans. We're using Helda beans today, but any flat green beans would do. The whole dish is very simple and it cooks in about 30 minutes. So let's do it. First, we want to render out the duck fat and caramelize the duck. So stove on. Just to make cooking easier and faster, I like to separate the drum from the thigh. So we find the joint, wiggle, 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 and you jam your knife. I mean, you can do it on a chopping board, I just don't want to wash. We initially did this with pork belly, which was incredibly tasty. But the cooking time for pork belly, or lamb, or any braising joint for that matter, is significantly longer than the beans, and we ended up having to do them in 2 stages. With duck leg, you could literally time this to perfection, and you have a beautiful dinner in 30 minutes. So just to help them get started, we're gonna add a generous amount of vegetable oil. Because of the uneven shape of the duck leg, we'll skim out most of the fat before we start the braising process. So don't worry too much about the fat. Whitewash my hand, take it in. Now, season. Salt. What's going to happen here is first, the heat would render out the beautiful fat that's under the skin. And we all know fat is flavor. And then the duck would brown in its own fat. Protein and fat at high heat, we get the Maillard reaction, which is what's going to make the meat taste meatier. Now, while that's happening, we prepare our Helda beans. The initial inspiration of the dish came from a few things. One, when we're preparing paella valenciana, I realized how much caramelized beans could add to the flavor profile of the finished dish. And similarly, our neighbors at Greek restaurant like to make their lamb stew with flat green beans. So we thought, why not pork belly? And then, why not duck? This might look like a lot, but trust me, once you've wilted them down and evaporated their water content, they will shrink so much that you wish you cooked more. Even if you're using shorter varieties, make sure you top and tail them, because that would really speed up the absorption of flavors. Brilliant. Now, we check on the duck. If they're sticking in the beginning, it's absolutely fine, by the way. Once they've rendered out the fat and fully caramelized, they're going to release themselves. So, a bit longer. Now, we turn and we cook the other side. Now, we add some aromatic vegetables. Today we're using the holy trinity of Chinese cooking, but any aromatic vegetable would do. You could use carrot, celery, onion if you wish, just to give us some depth and complexity. So, a bit of ginger, and we'll keep them chunky because of the long cooking time. The garlic will add them whole because they burn quite easily if they're chopped. Again, same with the scallion. Chunky to avoid burn. Now, we fish out the duck leg pieces for now. And we don't skim off the excess fat just yet because we're cooking a huge batch of French beans. We need all the help we have. So heat back up and the Helda beans, they go in. And we cook them until they're all bright green. If it's really crowding your pan, you can do this in batches, but just because we're going to braise them anyway, and nobody don't bother. We season with just a bit of salt to help them release their moisture, because we're going to add the soy sauce and the oyster sauce later. Once you have this wonderful, vibrant green color that we talked about, we skim off the fat. Because remember, when we put the duck back to braise, they will release even more duck fat. Of course, this you can use to roast some potatoes. Once you're happy with the amount of fat that remains in the pan, we add a very generous amount of soy sauce. Soy sauce, they burn quite easily, so make sure you're not using high heat at this point. Once you hear the sizzle again, a very generous amount of oyster sauce. This has a ton of umami, and it'll also act as a thickener, a very mild thickener. Mix. Now we first add a relatively small dash of water so that we could deglass the pan with more control. Now you bring the heat back in and you inspect the bottom of any sticky bits, any burn bits from the duck or the garlic or the beans. Those are full of flavors, and you want to mop them up now to introduce the flavor to the cooking liquid instead of letting them burn with the heat. So once you're happy, we add the duck back in, along with any resting juices. Of course, give it a thorough mix. Try to form one even layer, because that will minimize the need for dilution with liquid. Okay, I said it's a 30-minute meal, maybe 45 is more realistic, yeah? Now, we add just enough water to cover everything. And we cook this all the way through at medium-high heat for 15 to 20 minutes until the beans are wilted but not broken. I'll see you then. Alright, after 20-25 minutes, during which I did not cover this with a lid, by the way, just to reduce this beautiful cooking liquid. Now, to finish the dish, fish out the duck legs. We've had just enough time for the connective tissues to break down, but still holding its shape really well. So we're gonna take the meat off the flesh, and we keep this reducing at medium-high heat, so that by the time the dish finishes cooking, most of the liquid has either been evaporated or absorbed by the beans. And you reduce it down to the desirable consistency. If you're having this with rice, of course, you can afford to have it a bit more liquidy. But if you're having it with something else, reduce it more so that most of the liquid has disappeared. That's perfect for me. So stove off. And now we can plate. So beautiful. You have the ginger, you have the garlic, you have the extremely wilted scallion white. The ginger are incredible, by the way. The beans, they have absorbed all the beautiful flavors from the duck, the soy sauce, the oyster sauce, the ginger, the garlic. Oh, duck pieces. The duck pieces, they're still holding their shape really well, but we gave them just enough time for the tough connective tissues to soften. Of course, the best part, the jus. And that's it. Our family's new favorite weeknight meal. This is braised duck leg with Helda beans. I really, really hope you enjoy.